All right, everybody. Bonus pod here with Mr. Ignatowich.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Yeah, Q&A here from a top 5 pro. So we are going to Jimmy has he's given his time over, and I really appreciate that. We're gonna answer some questions from you all trying to learn. Jimmy, if you don't know this, obviously this is an instructional channel, and a lot of people send questions in, and they want to learn from higher level players how we think, what we think about different things, and just as a general rule, right? A lot of these players, they may or may not state their level, so I want you to think of more. Obviously, these are amateur players. A lot of them could be different ages, different walks of life, and also different levels. So we'll just get right into it. Anything you want to start off with?
Well,
dude?
for those who don't know, my dad is he's a 3-5 player. He's trying to get as good as he can be, and he's just doesn't have a ton of talent for the game. He's been playing for a year now, and he's locked in. He's been watching all of Jordan's videos. I've been hearing every time I talk to my dad about pickleball, it's like, oh, well, Briones said this, Kyle, that pickleball guy, said this. I'm like, I don't want to hear it. So he doesn't take my advice. It's kind of like, how
right.
like a kid won't take his parents' advice. He won't take my advice with pickle. He just wants to hear it from you.
Okay.
So,
All right. Maybe does he have a question? Maybe you can text him. No, he's not up.
Yeah, right. He's definitely not up.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Jimmy. Let's get right into it. I just want to start with this. Let's say the average, because I teach so much, and actually you teach a lot, Jimmy, too. But let's say the average player, let's take a 3-5. We won't go age range, but average 3-5. What are the main things that main things that they can be focusing on and practicing right now? Obviously, there's a million things, right? But let's boil it down to a few that would just get them in the right direction. That if you were coaching someone at that level.
Yeah, I think that for 3-5s, it becomes more about drilling, and I think less about games if you are very serious about getting better. Because at the higher levels, you're going to get more reps, more repetitions, more actual contacts made with the ball on an hourly basis than you will at the 3-5 level, because the 3-5 level has shorter rallies. So if you're playing for an hour with fellow 3-5s, you're really not going to be hitting as many balls as, if I go out there and play with pros. We're going to have long, structured rallies. And to get better, you have to build that structure, and you're not going to build it in a game with other 3-5s. It's just tough. So I think for me, I'm at about 50-50 game to drill, but I think for 3-5s, it should be something like, if you really want to get better, and again, I mean, some 3-5s just want to have fun, and that's fine too. But if you are serious about it, you should be drilling 75 to 80% of the time.
I like that answer, man.
Yep.
I like it. Yeah, really good. Okay. First to start, names may or may not be in here, but let's just go down the list. Let's see here. Are there any specific drills that I can do to help with the split step while moving to the non-volley zone line while playing the serve side? I keep getting caught rushing to the line, and I'm finding this bad habit hard to break. I don't know what they mean about the serve side, but I'm just assuming some split step drills as they're maybe coming in. What do you think, Jimmy?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it would make sense for me to take this question because I'm known as the guy that split steps way more than he should be.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Yeah. So you are the split step master, right? 3,000, right? And that's the amount of the amount of split steps you've taken per game, I think. But so really quick, Jimmy, why is it important to split step, and what does a good solid split step look like in your eyes?
Yeah, so for me, it's a little different. I think the reason I split step so much is just to keep myself loose and adrenalized, because I tend to overthink. And if the more I'm moving, jumping around, the less I'm thinking. So it keeps me loose. But I think for somebody who's not as OCD and overthinking as me, and you really just want to do it for the purposes of playing better pickleball, I think that split stepping is something you should be doing when the opponent makes contact with the ball. So you don't want to do it before, you don't want to do it after. Right when they make contact, you split step, so you're on your toes and you're ready for it to go either way. So people are split stepping in other sports, tennis, basketball.
Yeah.
Split step is your legs are wider than shoulder width, so you're not just standing straight up.
Yeah.
They're wider than shoulder width so that you're balanced, because the wider you are, the lower you are. If you were to stand perfectly straight up like this, you're going to be as tall as you can be. As you make your legs wider, you get shorter.
Yeah.
The lower you are, the easier it is to be balanced. So it gets you lower, it gets you wide, and ultimately you don't really know where the ball is going to go. And if you're leaning this way, if I'm leaning this way when Jordan makes contact with the ball, then there's a 50% chance I'm going to look like a genius and a 50% chance I'm going to look dumb.
Yeah.
With the split step, there's a better chance of me at least having a good shot of getting the ball.
I like that. So drill though, a specific drill. Is there anything that you can kind of recommend?
Well, for that question, so it was they were getting caught on the serving side. So meaning when they serve, they were getting caught
on their
in the
way in,
transition
maybe
zone.
in their 5th or 7th.
Yeah. So I think that might mean that they are split stepping at the wrong time. Because if you're moving forward, and again, moving forward through the transition zone is mostly a feel thing, and it's actually pretty subjective because it depends on so many factors. It depends on who you're playing. So if I'm going against somebody that I have a big hands advantage against, if I'm playing against, for example, just Anna in a skinny singles game, my transitional shot doesn't have to be that good. I'll just follow it in because I'm confident that my hands will bail myself out. And that goes down through all the levels. If you think you have way better hands than your opponent, or even a somewhat significant advantage, then you can move through quicker. But if I'm playing against a guy like J.W. Johnson,
that has good rolls and
exactly,
pressure,
I'm going to be patient, and I'll be more like a Colin Johns. You see Colin will take, he'll spend 4 or 5 shots back there. He'll take a step of foot in, another foot in. He'll just keep going and resetting and resetting.
Yeah.
So it depends on who you are, who you're playing against. And I think ultimately the split step issue, getting caught in transition, that's probably because they're split stepping after their opponent makes contact.
Yeah.
Because it's rarely going to be that they're split stepping too early.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a better problem to have than split stepping too late.
Yeah. One of the things when I coach, actually, I say this a lot in my 2-day intensives, but I've never found a player yet, actually, that I train that split steps too early.
Yeah.
And that is actually a problem.
Yeah.
It's always too late. So, yeah. Really good. Okay. Second one here. Here's a good one. Hey, Jimmy, we're going to maybe talk about this a little bit. Watching this section on getting coaching, would either of you or both of you consider video coaching? Where for some fee, players can send you a 5-minute video or something like that and break it down. Jimmy, you do something like that, huh?
Yeah. So if you go to james-ignatowich.com, you can sign up for exactly that. You send me footage of you, up to an hour of it, I'll watch, and then I send you back. And there's different options. You can do 15 minutes, 30, an hour. I send you back like a full page of notes. I could send you back a video feedback. There's options to call me, to Zoom call me. There's a bunch of stuff.
Wow, you can get your number, huh?
Yeah, well, burner phone.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
A burner.
But that's just me. I'm sure. I mean, his coaching is probably better than mine. So
no, that's really cool. Yeah, so check that out if you want to get some feedback from a top player. If you want to sign up for actual coaching in person, go to brionespickleball.com, and we have some 2-day intensives lined up there. But coaching at any level is super important, especially if you're struggling or you don't know where to go. A lot of players are like locked in at a plateau and something like this. Actually, here's a cool question for you, Jimmy. As the game grows, we're seeing it with Anna Lee Waters. We're seeing it with her mom. We're seeing some coaches, obviously MLP style. We're having some coaches. At what point, what do you think the game's going to be like when it comes to coaches? And even in your game, do you find, like, let's say you're playing with Matt Wright this year, or do you find a benefit? Do you think there's a benefit of even at this level? Let's say if money wasn't the issue or whatever, would it be beneficial for you and Matt to have a coach?
I think having a coach is always beneficial because it's, one of the things that humans in general are the worst at is evaluating ourselves. We have no idea. Yeah. And we're always biased.
Well, especially in real time.
Oh, of course. Yeah. In real time for sure. But even watching it back, I'll watch myself back and say, wow, that shot looked great. And then somebody else will say, well, maybe not for this reason and that reason. And you need outside opinions. You need different opinions. They don't have to be right. And, there's no opinion that's more right than another even. But having a coach, having somebody else to bounce ideas off of, go back and forth with, and just maybe keep you on the right trajectory is one thing. And secondly, there's going to be times where your technique will break down and you don't actually know that it's happening. It's like earlier this year, when I would get nervous when I was resetting the ball, I would stand up straight, and I didn't realize I was doing it. And then somebody else pointed it out to me, and then I fixed it. And that type of stuff is just, it's so essential. So having a coach is, if you're very serious about it, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so next one, Jimmy, we're gonna keep hopping into the next one. How can this is general and kind of broad, but I want you to kind of think outside the box here, and we can go off each other. But how can you be more proactive, anticipate where your opponent is going to hit their shot? I am playing more reactive than proactive now, and find myself out of position to return their ball. What should I look for? This is a super common question at many levels, but just initial thoughts on that question.
Yeah, I think that for me, I had a very similar problem because when I was getting started, I was always getting pushed into higher groups because I was really good at singles and I wasn't that good at doubles. So I knew the best players, but I wasn't really ready to play doubles with them. And I always felt like I was on a string, like I was a year and a half in, or even less than that, playing with like JW and Dylan. And I just was like, what is going on? I have no idea. So I think that one of the things that you can do right away is you can react more quickly with your feet first. So I would try to tell myself when I'm in transition or when I'm moving around, I want the first thing to move to be my feet. Because if I'm late with my feet and then I'm moving side to side and I'm off balance, that's where things become a problem. So I try to be really ready with my feet first. And then a lot of it comes from watching. I think the more that you watch pickleball, you'll realize the patterns that happen. Like, if you speed up from wide across somebody's body, it's probably going to the middle. They call that the triangle, right?
Yeah.
And I think you might have even done a video on that.
Yeah.
You did?
Something very similar, yeah.
Yeah, see, I'm studying. But stuff like that. I mean, and it's also just knowing that, other things. Like if the ball is really low on the sideline off the bounce, they're probably not going to speed it up down the line. It's the highest part of the net. They don't have a lot of space to go into. Yeah. So you can move a little more to the right. You can lean in and try to poach a dink out of the air. And these types of things, a coach will help you. And it's just like taking the horse to water or whatever that term is. Like the coach will help you, but ultimately you have to figure that stuff out yourself. And a lot of it is just subconscious, just understanding the patterns and really when you can do it without thinking, that's when you can do it. If you have to think about it, you're not really doing it.
Yeah.
It's like me with Ernie's. I still can't Ernie because I think about it.
That's something. Yeah, you got to work on that one. Okay. So, proactive versus reactive. The first thing that I would say is that like, very, very similar to the feet, but especially at lower levels, players are out of position a lot. So just like you talked about the feet, if you can be in a better position, when players, I think, talk about being reactive versus proactive, if you're not in the right position to start with, you're going to be kind of on the defense and reacting to the ball as if you were in a good position. So just really simply, shading, following the ball is probably a good place to start for most players. So just making sure that if you don't know what that is, we have a lot of videos on that. But, if the ball is moving towards your left or towards your right, just doing a good job of shuffling over, following it will help a lot. So that's a loaded question, but yeah, really good stuff. We're gonna move on there. Really quick here. We just watched your review of Selkirk Lux. Excited to try it. My question is, where do you find lead tape results on the paddle? How much weight and where do you add it? So you are using, Jimmy, the Invicta Power Air. Do you use any lead tape? And any answers or feedback for players who are experimenting with lead tape?
Yeah, I think lead tape is really helpful. I didn't always use it. For the first year of my career, I didn't use any lead tape. And it's, there's pros and cons to it, but ultimately I think it is more of a pro than a con. Everybody knows that it increases the sweet spot and it generally becomes easier with the soft stuff. I've always found that a heavier paddle, it's a little easier to control and it's going to move a little more slowly through the air. But if you can handle that, I think it's worth it. You'll also probably get some more power. For me, in terms of where I put it almost all around, but I leave a little bit of empty space at the top because any weight at the top of the paddle is effectively more heavy than weight that's been put on the bottom edges because of the leverage, how the leverage works. It takes a long time to explain, but just know that any weight that you put up down there closer to the grip, it's not going to be as heavy for the swing weight as weight that's up top. So maybe start there. I would probably recommend starting a little closer to the grip and then moving forward. So
Okay. All right. So how much lead tape do you use currently?
so almost all around, but not at the top. And the
So
final weight comes out to 8.5. So it's not that heavy.
oh, okay. All right. All right. So here we go. Right here. Next question. What's your approach to playing with a lefty with regards to avoiding confusion as to who takes down the middle shots? I find it usually results in 1 or 2 errors per game. Now, another loaded question. Positioning has a lot to do with it, but this just leads into Jimmy. The old forehand takes the middle kind of thinking. Let's quickly talk about your kind of approach. Obviously, you play at a super high level. How would you explain that to like a 3-0 to a 4-0 player?
Yeah, I think for me, I've only played a pro tournament with a lefty one time, but I can tell you how I think it should be played because me and Tyler did it a little differently because we have different strengths. But if you're playing with a lefty, if you're right and you're playing with a lefty partner, and let's just assume everything is similar because that's the only way we can really refer to this question.
Yeah.
At the kitchen line, if the ball is coming from wide, then let's say, I'm on the right and I'm a lefty and the ball is coming from in front of me. So the opposing left side player's outside foot, then I've got to cover my line just like anybody that's on the right does. So then the forehand in the middle is probably my partner's, right? So usually it depends on where the ball is coming from. So the inverse of that is true also. If I'm a righty on the left and I'm playing the left here and Jordan speeds it up right down at my line, I've got to be on that. So then the forehand in the middle is my partner's. So it's not as simple as like left side player takes the middle anymore. It's more of where is the ball coming from, and that's who takes the middle. But there should be discussion in terms of who takes the thirds in the middle, because the thirds, it's a little less.
Well, there's more time.
There's more time, and there's also, I found there's a lot of variance in players' ability to hit thirds at these levels. Like you've got 4-0s that can hit monster drives, and then you've got 4-0s that can't. Like I think at the lower levels, there's a ton of variance in who's a better crasher.
Yes.
Like that's another thing. I mean, you could be a 4-0, and one 4-0 could be like a 50-year-old man that has great soft stuff and drops but can't crash because he's too old, right? And then you've got another like young guy that can't get a drop down for his life, but he's a great crasher. Who should be taking the thirds? You don't really see that stuff in the pro game as much, but at the lower levels, there's so much variance in thirds.
Yeah. So on that, someone who's more mobile, or maybe a good driver or a good dropper. So in what situation? Let's just give a scenario like that. Who would take that third in that situation?
Yeah. So you always want the better crasher to not be taking it. So, for example, when I play with Anna. I don't know if her thirds are better than mine. Maybe they are. Some people, I'm sure she would say that they are. But if there's a third in the middle, I actually want her to take it because I am a significantly better crasher than she is.
So that you can put more pressure at the net, like coming up on your fifth.
Totally. Yeah. So that's a good way to kind of decode it. It's if you guys are similar in terms of who's better at thirds, then who's better at crashing? And whoever's better at crashing, the other person takes the third.
Okay. All right. I like that. Here we go. So we got pickleball next. Pickleball is a game of momentum. Jimmy, you play at the very highest level. It changes frequently during the match. What strategy can be used to regain momentum after it's been lost? We've all done this. We've all been really, really far up in a game and lost, and we've all come back on a certain game, whatever level, if you're playing rec or high tournaments, anything like that. What do you think it is? How do you regain focus? So regain momentum. Let's say momentum was yours, it's lost. Anything you do specifically mentally or just with your partner?
Yeah, so my philosophy on this is I'm never going to lose a game by more than 4 points without using both of my timeouts. That's my philosophy. Me and Anna is maybe a little different here, but for me, if I'm losing by more than 4, which means it's not super close, I'm using both of my timeouts. So I think I don't really watch too much of the rec players play tournaments, so I don't know how often they're using their timeouts or how often they aren't. But if you have two timeouts and you're losing 11-4 in a game and you didn't use either of your timeouts, I think that's a wasted opportunity because me personally, I actually think that there should be 1 timeout afforded to each team per game. I think that 2 timeouts is a little excessive for 1 game to 11. But while there is 2 timeouts in 1 doubles game to 11, you shouldn't be getting blown out and not using them. So,
Yeah.
and again, one other thing too is that everyone kind of processes momentum differently. So if I'm playing against you and you are hitting great shots, but maybe you're, quiet about it, you're not getting super loud about it, then I might not actually have a read on how much momentum or how confident you really are. But then let's say you're getting loud and I feel it affecting me and I'm starting to get annoyed, or like, you have to be conscious of not just the concept of momentum, but how you feel internally.
So your emotional state, you're saying.
Totally.
So like, okay, so rec play, right? You can't call timeouts, right?
Not
Anything.
unless you want to get made fun of.
Yeah, anything, or just anything psychologically or mentally that you can do, or I mean, you've been involved in really high level matches. So besides calling a timeout, I guess obviously you have that availability. But let's say you don't have timeouts left. What can you do? Or just one tip.
Well, in rec, one thing that I've done, if there's a team, if we're playing one sort of way and they've won maybe 5 points in a row and they're having a lot of success, I'll try to play whatever the antithesis or the exact opposite of that strategy is. Do that for a couple points and see what happens, and then you can go back.
Yeah. No, it's really good, dude. All right. Do you change to different grips while playing? Examples: overhead versus drive versus forehand, backhand shots, and so on. Actually, this is an interesting question, Jimmy, because I, like you, I have, I've been working on all my different shots, right? Rolls on both sides, counters with two hands, one hand, rolls with two hands, one hand. Let's just start with serves and drives. I'd like to get your take. What grip are you in?
Yeah, so for serves and drives, it's Eastern.
Yep.
And it's actually maybe even in between an Eastern and a semi-Western for the serve.
Okay,
so
you're pretty close, but still Eastern. Got it.
Yeah, and then the drive is more or less Eastern.
Okay.
And then I can explain why, but it's
basically it closes your paddle face a little bit more, and as you come over the ball, it's a little bit easier to get spin. What about let's talk about at the kitchen line for I guess dinks here. Let's just talk about dinks, and what dinks do you switch grips, or are you actually in continental or Eastern for everything?
I think I've experimented with it, and at this point I've committed to just being in continental for everything. And to have a forehand speed up with a continental grip, it takes a lot of wrist, and it takes wrist flexion, and it takes good acceleration. And since I have that, I'm able to use it, but I don't necessarily teach it. I think.
So you're in true. You think you're in true continental?
Well, when I'm countering, I think I might slip to almost an Eastern just by.
You're not countering. You mean when you
when I'm at the kitchen in general.
Yeah, gotcha.
Then I might, if I do it, I'm not thinking about it. It might just be a slight switch.
Eastern. When you're talking about attacking, you mean?
Yeah.
Got it.
Because it's definitely more Eastern than more continental than my drive. Yes. And I know my drive is Eastern. So maybe it's in between Eastern and Conti, but it's tough because if you speed up off of a forehand and then it comes right back to your one-handed backhand counter, that forehand was in a semi-Western grip, you're going to be pretty weak here. You can't have a semi-Western one-handed backhand counter. And the extreme example of that is if somebody had a Western grip and a one-handed backhand counter, it's physically impossible. Yeah. Tell Riley to take the left hand off his paddle and see what happens.
Yes, and this is why Riley stays in too, on the backhand side. Okay, really good. What about you've been experimenting with rolls, leaning in. We're talking about maybe yellow zone, kind of at net level, a foot or two below it. Mm-hmm. Do you go to Eastern backhand, or are you staying continental?
That's a very good question. So I used to just do continental, and it was all right. And then I actually switched, and I didn't even try to switch. I just naturally started to move into like this more Eastern backhand. And it's true that's severe. I think, Ben refers to it as like a severe continental. Eastern backhand, severe continental, whatever it is, it's a shot that if you reverse it, your forehand's not going to be good. It's way better for me personally. Like
that's what I use. Yeah,
it's just so much more strength, and it's tough because you don't want to get caught up thinking about it or not thinking about it. But as long as you can do it without thinking.
Yeah, here. Let's see. Oh, 006.
Nice.
Here, I'm just gonna show just for the viewers real quick. Here, they can't hear me, but they could hear you, Jimmy.
Okay.
This is a continental.
That's continental.
Okay.
Yep.
We got Eastern.
Yep, that's an Eastern. Eastern backhand.
So that we can roll. All right.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I know we have videos on that, but just a little quick thing there. Okay, let's move on. Really good. Two-hander, by the way. Two-handed drives, speed ups, counters. You're just continental right hand and then left hand on top?
Yeah, pretty much. I don't teach this, but I interlock my hands because the power air grip is pretty small.
Here, so what do you show us?
Yeah, I can't fit both of my hands on the power air grip, so I will interlock it like this.
So how many do you have? Two. Let's see. You have two. Oh, you have one. How many fingers do you have on top of your right hand? Two.
I have pinky.
No, on top. That's touching the grip. Like one.
Oh.
Like one.
Yeah.
One or two.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's weird. I don't think anybody else holds it like that, but it works for me. So I just never change.
So you don't do. Oh, sorry. You're not finger up. Are you finger up?
Never.
I don't do that either.
It just feels weird for me.
It does too. You know what? I find the control. So Riley, Ben, Annalie, they all do this.
Yeah.
Right. I find the control in the dinks. Like I could kind of feel it. I'm still experimenting. But dude, when it comes to drives, I cannot have this finger up here. It like hurts my finger.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But
yeah, no, it's not for me either.
Okay. So here we go. Grip position. Let's see here. All right, here we go. Very simple one. I know these are all over the place, Jimmy. But why do I miss third shot consistently at the kitchen line? At the kitchen line, particularly if it comes right at me. I am confused.
It seems to me like they're referring to third shots that come at them while they're at the kitchen line.
Okay,
Like it comes right at them, like a third coming right at them.
got it. So let's talk about that. Oh, that's going. So maybe it's their fourth shot. Again, maybe a more aggressive third shot drops, maybe with topspin. And again, it's getting harder and harder to handle with the technology and with players dropping with topspin. And a lot of
Could be a drive too. They didn't specify whether or not it was a drive or a drive.
maybe. Okay, so let's just
It's
go.
a poorly worded question.
Let's go either or. Let's go. Yeah. So what do you have? Maybe some tips, Jimmy, about drives coming hard at players at the net, and then maybe aggressive drops. Maybe tips for each of those.
Yeah. So, well, they're so different because an aggressive drop, I actually think the worst thing, if it has a lot of topspin, is if you let it bounce, you're going to be in a tough spot. Because if it has so much topspin, if you try to short hop it after it bounces, it's going to pop up. And you see that happen at the pro level too. Like the most aggressive, really topspinny drops that'll land maybe 1 foot behind the kitchen.
Yeah.
Those ones, if you short hop them and you don't pop it up, more power to you. That's impressive. And I think the best thing to do is actually to try your best to get it out of the air because
it's tough either way.
Yeah. And I think ultimately, if it's a very aggressive topspin roll drop, you're best served to just cut your losses, poke it out of the air, keep it low, and essentially just relinquish control of the kitchen.
Maybe just dink it, right? So that's one. Or if you have really good footwork and fast feet, you can shuffle step back really, really quickly. But again, you don't have a lot of time. Okay.
You can.
Yeah. So third shot drives, if they're missing it consistently, what are some maybe ready position tips, or what are just some tips in general you can, again, basically against bangers, right? If they're receiving really fast balls.
Yeah. So it depends on what type of drive it is. And I think that when you can identify what the type of drive that is beating you is, then you can make the decision, because there's two different types of drives that will beat you. Number one is the drive that is just too hard. They're just ripping it and they're crushing it right at you, and the pure pace of that drive is too much for you to handle. And if that's the case, I would take a step or 2 steps off the line. I've never had that problem, but I would take a couple steps off the line because, for one, it gives you more time, and 2, it makes it easier for you to recognize that it's going out.
Yes.
So you can leave it. If you're right up there cramped on the kitchen line, it's tough to recognize whether you can leave it or not. If you're back here, it's a lot easier to let the ball go. And then there's the other type of drive, which I think is actually the better drive. It's the drive that's beating you because it's going like this.
Yeah.
Dropping.
Dipping down.
That one is tough, and you actually should, if you're already established, hug the kitchen line. Hug the kitchen line and just... I would just dink it back and kind of relinquish control.
Yeah, and we'll try not to swing big. I mean, more of like a block volley. Keep your paddle really still.
And on those, I think on drives, if you're going to block it, you can put two hands on it. I've had some success just putting two hands on those blocks for extra stability.
Yeah.
But that's, to each their own.
Yeah, that's good. All right, special question for you, Jimmy. When playing mixed doubles, what can you do when they constantly hit to her, aka Anna Bright?
Yeah, well, that happens every match I play. And, I think that it's a fine line, because in rec, as a guy, you want to be a good.
Well, no, not in rec. Let's say we're talking about tournament players here. 3-5, 4-0.
Okay.
Let's just say any level though.
Okay.
What are some actual strategies that you can employ if they're isolating?
Yeah. So traditionally, mixed will devolve into forehand cross-court dinks between the two girls, and essentially they're just both keeping it away from the guy at all costs. And you'll see in the pro game these long forehand cross-court dinking rallies. And when girls are getting isolated, most of them think that the best thing to do is just to hit it back to the girl. But if you can go behind the guy either with a dink that is safe or dinking to the guy's inside foot, a lot of those dinks that go to the guy's inside foot will let your male partner get involved. Because if two girls are dinking cross-court back and forth, it's not as easy for me to get involved, because there's a lot of distance between girl 1 and girl 2. That cross-court, lowest part of the net also, so they can really knife those dinks if they want to. It's tougher to get involved. So I don't think enough women are actually looking to do like middle dead dinking.
Yes. Or just middle dinks, just mixing it up. Middle is huge. I teach a lot on middle dinks and how effective it is. So really good, dude.
And especially if you're on the right. And here's the thing about middle dinking from the right. So let's say you're a girl on the right and you're playing mixed, and there's a guy in front of you and he's hitting it hard. He's got a lot of power, and you don't want to engage in a hands battle with him, which makes total sense. Well, if you make the ball bounce in the middle, just make it bounce in the middle, you are so safe to just sit backhand, because if it's coming from the middle and he attacks you, anything going over your right shoulder is out no matter what. And then your guy partner on the left, you would hope he could be able to handle an opposing guy's attack. If he can't, then that's his fault. Right? Making it bounce against guys is so important, because where guys really, really, impose their will in mixed is out of the air attacks, because there's not a lot of out of the air attacks in women's, and women don't see it that often. But an off the bounce attack from the middle that you can sit backhand on, that's way more easily handled.
Oh yeah, really good strategy. And you can you're talking about just maybe, even if it's any dink off the bounce, maybe kind of like a Colin Jaws, they could kind of slide. And if they're going to attack it off the bounce in general, then they only have one shot to cover, and that guy will be squeezing to the right anyways. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, really good stuff. Okay, so get this question a lot, but from a pro here, when should I hit a third shot drive instead of a drop? So obviously, lots of different scenarios, lots of different things, mixed, men's, but just in general, let's just call it, let's just say men's, right? When do you hit a third shot drive instead of drop?
Yeah, I like how you specified between mixed and men's, because it is different.
Yeah.
And I think that it's funny, it's kind of counterintuitive. And I've been asked this question so many times. This is the most popular question for whatever reason. And it's counterintuitive, because for me, the deeper the return is and the higher the quality of the return, the more likely I am to drive. And the reason for that is, if I hit a low driving third off of a deep return, it's going to make my fifth way easier. And hitting a drop, let's say if Jordan were to hit a really hard deep return at me, lands this far from the baseline, me trying to drop that in is a tall task, especially for me. I'm not as confident in my drops as Jordan probably is. I don't have the best drops, So for me, I'm going to drive those deeper ones so I get an easier fifth. And if it's a shorter return, I'm going to drive them less often. I'm going to drive, and again, depending on how good my serve was, if I can catch them in transition with an aggressive drop that bounces maybe 3 feet past the kitchen line, like we were talking about earlier, I think that would be the ideal play there. Because if somebody hits a short return against you, and it's, let's say you're 5 feet behind the kitchen line, if you try to drive that ball with any amount of pace and it's low, it's either going out or your opponent is going to make contact with it at shoulder height, and you're already that close to the kitchen line since it was a short return, so good luck defending against a shoulder height fourth. Just drop it.
Yeah. No, really good stuff. Here's an interesting one. This is a little technical here, Jimmy, and I'm going to get your input on this. I am practicing a topspin dink and topspin third shot drop. I see the tournament players are finishing over their dominant side shoulder often these days. I assume since the majority of them are tennis players, it is to keep them from extending through too much. I'm a tennis professional. I've been told I follow through on my shots for pickleball. Too much follow through, particularly at the non-volley zone line. I want to know your input on this. Think before thoughts on this, Jimmy. Think before you maybe answer here. Again, so the question is basically, where's the finish on topspin dinks? And obviously, is this specified? No, we're not. We don't know if this is forehand or backhand. I could pretty much assume it's forehand topspin dinks.
Gotta be forehand
and drop, but finish. Talking about follow through. What are your thoughts on that? And what do you see actually on the tour? Do you see the same follow through, or do you see variances?
Yeah, so this is actually a really relevant question because there's so many people coming in from extensive tennis backgrounds that are now playing pickleball. And in tennis, you're taught to finish over your opposite shoulder. And the wrist is a big part of the shot. And in pickleball, you're taught to, on drops and on dinks, use as little wrist as possible. And I think that the reason for finishing on your dominant side is that it's going to prevent the use of any extra wrist, because the wrist action, this motion of finishing this way, is never going to be conducive to a very, consistent drop or a dink. I mean, the point of dropping and dinking isn't to hit a ton of spin or a ton of power. You're not going to blow anybody off the court with your powerful dinks or your powerful drops. It's, can you make it 20 times in a row under pressure? And what's the most repeatable motion? Is it this, finishing over your opposite shoulder with wrist, or is it literally just a conveyor belt upward with finishing just like this? I think that's the most repeatable, easy motion. So yeah, finishing on your dominant side shoulder makes for no wrist, which I think is super important. And I think that's what I see the most when I teach these clinics, is people just going like this and doing crazy things.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I've in my experience, I studied. Obviously, we talked about in our previous podcast how Ben, right? We asked building a perfect player drops. I see him finish two different ways. When he is finished, so let's say he's, for some reason, right, he's like way, how he takes a lot of court, Colin, let's say his third. So he's like, let's say he's like 3 to 4 feet past the center line.
Do that one.
Well, he'll come and let's say he's dropping actually towards cross court now. Yeah. Maybe to the opposite side. So his finish will be more across him because he's actually rolling this way. But if let's say he gets a return and it's on the left side now, on the odd side, and he gets it in the corner, and now he's dropping obviously cross court to the player's backhand, the right-hander's backhand over there, his finish will be more dominant side. So sometimes I just think it's kind of like where the swing path is going. And then I do see different players finish different ways, but the biggest key thing, the wrist thing is really interesting. What you're saying, just lifting more with the shoulder and keeping it really simple. What I've been experimenting with actually in my game is obviously two-handed topspin drops. And I've tried, if you watch a Riley, his technique, and I might do a video on this really soon, but very unorthodox, and he just literally lifts like straight up with the shoulders. And then you watch like a Connor or someone like that. Like I think I'm more comfortable actually rolling and actually finishing more to my across my body. With your topspin drops, let's say on your backhand, have you noticed, or do you know where your finish is?
Yeah, and I think the thing with Riley is it's probably a product of how open his grip is, because with his backhand it's so open. So he can't really, like, for him to do that, it's not as natural of a motion. For me, I'm stopping it pretty short, and I'm kind of, it's generally a pretty tight motion. And I think that's more of just me and my natural tendency to be tight, I guess. Like when I hit the backhand dink and when I hit the backhand drop, I'm not doing a big swing. I'm kind of just stopping it right here. So I wouldn't necessarily teach that. I think the main thing that I would teach as it relates to a two-handed backhand and topspin drop is, people don't realize this, you have to use your legs more on a two-handed backhand topspin drop than a forehand, because the paddle is not as below the ball naturally as it is on a forehand. A forehand, you're going to be in this position, under the ball completely. On the backhand, for me at least, I'm getting some of the outside of the ball. I'm not coming directly under the ball. So since I'm not coming under it, I'm getting some side spin. I have to get lower. And that's why me and Connor's another good example of this too. Like, we get really low on our backhand dink.
Yeah, no, really good, man. Okay, next one here. We have a few more, and then I think we're going to watch some footage here. But what are we at? Oh, my. Time is flying here. Time is flying through.
40 minutes?
Okay, so here we go. Last question, and we're going to get to some footage. I've been playing about 4 months and learned so much from YouTube videos. I have a question about when to advance to the non-volley zone when your partner is serving. Some told me to hang back and only advance when they advance. Would love your perspective. Jimmy, this is probably one you probably get in every teaching clinic that you do. Thoughts on that? And actually, here's a good question. I'm going to give you just a lead in. Thoughts on that generally, but is it different from amateurs and pros? Go ahead.
Good question. Yeah, so that's a good way to put it, because it has so many different qualities. I mean, the question, because in mixed doubles, for example, I'm more likely to disconnect from Anna and just go forward, because if the opposing female is hitting the ball, even if her drop's a little high, I'm okay with being attacked in the transition zone or if I run up to the kitchen. But in men's doubles, you generally want to be pretty consistent with your partner, because if you are all the way at the kitchen line and then your partner is on the baseline hitting drops and then they're being targeted, if they hit one that's too high, you're going to get crushed. So it also depends on how much you trust your partner's drops, obviously. You know, there's so many different things that go into it, but choosing when to move in and when not to move in, I try to keep it as simple as possible when I'm going into a match. I try not to think so much of where I want to, this and that, because you don't want to be thinking so much while you play. So what I think of when I'm looking at the criteria of what is a ball I want to move in on or not move in on, it is, does it resemble a dink that I wouldn't back up off of? Because it's not going to always resemble a perfect dink. But is this drop a dink that I wouldn't run away from? Then it's worth coming in off of.
Yeah, no, really good, man. Jimmy, thank you. Actually, bonus.
If you're me,
I'm
nervous.
If you're looking at this right now, you're gonna have to wait for the future. Make sure you subscribe, and we're gonna break down some match footage. And so stay tuned for that. Hope you enjoy the Q&A. Leave a comment below if you have any more questions. Jimmy, thanks again.
And I'm glad that Jordan chose a match that I won. I was afraid that he was gonna choose one that I lost.
Yeah. So stay tuned, and we'll post this in a bit.